nightmare cocktail of everything you don't want anywhere near a camera. It's like a war zone. You got helicopters, flare guns, bombs, jets, fire tornadoes, chainsaws, cable news douchebags with untied boots. I've been baptized so many times by the ships that nothing electronic anywhere near me should work ever again. But the Reds just keep cranking. And I don't use a camera cover, because I'm an idiot. But it's a rad paint job. Every single camera I've used on the Fireline has gone down from the heat, except the Reds. So when some bro asks me, like, hey, would you trust a Red for a big client job? Dude, you're in an air-conditioned studio for 8 hours. I've taken my Reds to the gates of hell. Relax. Things are tanks. Filming wildfires is like this nightmare cocktail of everything you don't want anywhere near a camera. It's like a war zone. You got helicopters, flare guns, bombs, jets, fire tornadoes, chainsaws, cable news douchebags with untied boots. I've been baptized so many times by the ships that nothing electronic anywhere near me should work ever again. But the Reds just keep cranking. And I don't use a camera cover, because I'm an idiot. But it's a rad paint job. Every single camera I've used on the Fireline has gone down from the heat, except the Reds. So when some bro asks me, like, hey, would you trust a Red for a big client job? Dude, you're in an air-conditioned studio for 8 hours. I've taken my Reds to the gates of hell. Relax. Things are tanks. Filming while...
And we're live. Hello again. Welcome back to the Solitary series here on the Red YouTube channel. My name is Jonathan Petts. I'll be taking you through this session today. Can everyone hear me loud and clear? I just want to make sure our audio is coming through and working correctly. I'll just give it a few moments for the stream to catch up there. I'll just wait for some comments to come in. Hope everyone's doing well in isolation. Hope everyone's keeping busy, keeping active, hopefully creative as well at the same time. Just waiting for a moment here. I think there's probably like a 30-second delay on the comments here. There we go. Yep, coming through. Fantastic. So just want to give a quick shout out to everyone that signed up for today's session on proxy workflows. I also want to thank everyone who tuned in to the first two streams held by myself and James Lucarelli as well. We didn't know what to expect. It's the first time we've ever held streams on this channel and the first time I ever held a stream. So it's very much a bit of a baptism by fire, but it was great fun. And the feedback we got was really instrumental in bringing the proxy workflow stream up next. We want to hear your feedback. We want to hear what you guys want to see. And this was hot in that topic. We've also set up an email address now. So solitaryseries@red.com. So any questions you have, anything you want to see, myself, James, and the moderation team here in the chat have access to that email. We want to hear what you guys want to see. So let's dive right into proxy workflows. I've got a little pre-cooked little video from Clay Reed, our in-house filmmaker / editor, that's going to go over some of the things we're going to look at today, and then we'll really dive in detail, go through those, and then have a Q&A with Clay and Dan Duran at the end. So I'll just get my pre-caked video up, and I'll see you in a moment.
I'm Clay from Red. Because Red code is crazy powerful, especially when coupled with advancements in GPUs and multi-core processing, editing R3Ds is actually the best and easiest way to get the most out of your footage. But what happens if social distancing means that your client or your editor is asking that you upload all the footage in low res? Unfortunately, you're gonna need proxies or lower fidelity reference files. You can shoot them in camera here, or you can make them in just about any editing software. I'm choosing Red CineX. Okay, once those are rendered, upload the proxies to your favorite online DAM or digital asset manager. Now you can send a link to your editor. Okay, that was easy enough, but what about when I want to finish the project? Have your editor send over an EDL, XML, or even a project from your favorite editing software. I use Premiere Pro. Right-click Proxies in the bin, go down to Proxy and select Reconnect Full Resolution Media. That's it, you're all set. Thanks for watching and keep creating.
So thanks to Clay for putting together that really bite-sized little video, giving a very brief summary of what we'll be looking at today. I think we'll start off with actually generating proxies. There's a number of reasons why you may want to do this, And I kind of want to preface this session by going, hey, every workflow is going to be different. When I worked in the digital lab and as a DIT, workflows changed every single job. There's different requirements. That's why post supervisors exist. That's why there's lab supervisors who develop these workflows and change them each time. So this session is going to give you a really good intro and building blocks to develop one for the way that you work. So there may be some things that are really great for you and others that are not. But I think together we can really start to show how easy R3Ds can be integrated into any workflow. And starting off with proxies. So low-res files that, especially in isolation, can be sent around very easily, worked on low-powered machines. Maybe you don't have access to your studio to use your high-end iMac or desktop machine. You've got to work home on a little MacBook Air or something. So a number of places to generate them. Obviously, the first is in camera, and then there are other ones that are, you can do them in Resolve, Scratch, Silver Stack, and your editing platform of choice like Premiere or Final Cut can also generate proxies for you as well. So I'm just going to change over to my fancy new view. Some of you may have noticed that we've had a little bit of an upgrade here. Yes, this is a Rode NT USB Mini. I'm also streaming through a Monstro, so probably the most overkill webcam in existence with a very nice Zeiss Supreme Prime. We've got a DSM-C2 Gemini to my right here as well. So we're just going to see how we can set up proxies in camera, just to start off the session. Obviously, you don't have to do it this way. We're just going to come into where the compression settings are. We're then going to go down to Advanced. We're then going to see the menu structure, so menu, settings, recording, and then codec. And you can generate them either alongside your R3D, or you can just do just that file. You can scrap the R3D, because every now and again, maybe there's a really quick turnaround, and you have to get a file online quickly, and just working with that ProRes and baking it in is sometimes easier. But I would always say use the R3D and get the best digital negative possible. So for the purposes of this, we're going to do Apple ProRes. We're going to dive in, and we see that we then get a number of options that come up as a result. We can either shoot a 4K or a 2K proxy. Typically, I would always do a 2K proxy, but as 4K screens are getting much more prevalent in the market, editors will be starting to request 4K proxies very soon, or if not already. I'm going to select 4K, because why not? We've got a 4K laptop in front of me, the Razer Blade 15 with the 2080, just to be clear there. And we then get a number of options to do with the flavor. So in 4K, we get access to 422, anything from HQ to LT. If you want to get access to 4444 or 444XQ, a lot of fours there, you can go into 2K mode and get access to this. So we're going to go LT because we want the smallest possible footprint possible for our proxy file. We're then going to come down, and then we can only select log 3G10. If you want to get access to burning in some look, so a 709, you can shoot in 2K and burn that look in. It's just a couple of workarounds there for both of them. There's a couple of fantastic reasons for doing them in camera and not doing them after the fact. Obviously, speed is the first one. If you want to get these files and start editing them or send them off to an editor immediately, having them ready and raring to go is the perfect solution if you haven't got to do any more post-processing. But also, it can speed up existing renders. So when I was working as a DIT, a couple of jobs, I would have to do two sets of deliverables. I would do one that would go to an editor, so that would be a MXF, an Avid file, and then I'd have to do a PIX file. So a PIX file, well, a PIX is a system, kind of like a content review. So DPs, hair and makeup, art department could sign into the PIX system and view the day's rushes. And this was typically required as an H.264 720p. So I didn't want to have to do two sets of big renders. So I would generate that PIX file from the proxy file, and it would render at 2-3 times runtime. So it would churn through them, that way saving me having to sit on the camera truck for hours on end, and it can save you a lot of time at the end of the shoot. So a couple of use cases for shooting proxies in camera. One thing that while we're here, I will bring up, obviously the shoot time on the card will change. Obviously, if you need a long duration on the card, shooting proxies in camera can eat into that. So if you want to get the most amount of duration, don't shoot proxies in camera. So we're just going to change back to R3D. We see that we had 3 hours 48, but then without that proxy file, we get 5 hours 45 minutes. So quite a big change there. And the one final thing I just want to make sure you all do when you're shooting proxies, you come down to media, you go to device, you then come down to format media, And instead of doing FAT32, we use UDF. So FAT32 will segment clips into 4 GB chunks. And this is fine for the R3D because through the use of the SDK, every application that uses our SDK, so Resolve, Premiere Pro, Final Cut, Scratch, will see it as one long clip. It'll put those clips together for you and you won't even know that they're truncated. But for the ProRes, it will segment them, and that's not very useful because that can't utilize the RAW R3D SDK to get formed into one clip. You have to do it manually, which is pretty tedious and not really very usable. So by going into UDF, it will still segment the R3D clips, but it will span the ProRes file. So if you shot 10 minutes, you'll get a 10-minute ProRes file. Just ensure that your mag is running the latest firmware. So go on to red.com/downloads to ensure your mag is running the latest firmware to have the most amount of compatibility with working with UDF. So with shooting proxies in camera, I reckon we dive into actually generating them ourselves. So I'm just going to exit out of here and we will now jump over to my machine. So open up Resolve here and we are in DaVinci Resolve. So I'm choosing to generate my proxies using DaVinci Resolve. This is a personal preference. You can obviously generate them in any way that you like, but this is how I like to create them, how I created all my proxies as a DIT, and how I worked it in the lab. It's a really powerful tool. So what we're going to do is we're first going to set up our project. Either press Shift 9 or the little cogwheel down here in the bottom right-hand corner. And we're going to come into our camera raw initially. So we're obviously going to our red raw profile for how we're going to interpret the raw file. And what I usually do for generating proxies is I will drop down the decode quality. So by dropping down the decode quality, we can speed up that render time. And how this is working is, although it says half res, it's not half of 8K, it's half of the width and height. So 8192, half of that, 4096. So if we're generating a 4K proxy, use your decode quality to match that resolution. Likewise, if you're rendering a 2K proxy, you can then go down to quarter res good if your source file is 8K. So we're going to half res good because we're delivering a 4K proxy in this example. Make sure your timecode is set to camera, 16 on the bit depth, and we're going to decode using project. Because what we're going to do here is typically, if you've got a show LUT, please apply that during this stage in the color management panel. But because of the power of IPP2, we can convert straight into a color space, saving us a lot of time. If you're missing a LUT, if you lost it, or you're waiting for the DP to send it to you, we can just convert straight into Rec 709 and straight into BT1886. Likewise, if we're doing HDR. So a really quick way just to get straight into the color space you want to render in. We're then going to set our output tone map and highlight roll-off based off of the DP's requirements, those kind of things. Enable a bit of chroma noise reduction if you want to, and also, like in the last session, ensure that you tick all of these tick boxes to ensure they're being read from the camera's metadata field. The next bit that we're going to go into is the master settings. We're going to have a UHD timeline, so make sure when you start bringing in your clips that you've got a timeline that's going to be exporting them. We're then going to come down to general options. Now, this is quite an important bit for me when I used to work in the lab, and my lab supervisor would always wring my neck about this and ensure this was always set up properly. And this is in the conform options. So conform options are really powerful in that they can help you manage media better, and it can also make the relink much easier in post-production. I just saw somebody asking about the microphone. This is a Rode NT USB Mini. So one of the reasons why my lab supervisor was so on about real names is that sometimes editors will rename clips. Sometimes they go in, they change it to the scene in the take, they'll do whatever they want to do, and they can start sometimes causing problems. So by using a real ID, it's a metadata column, we can put the clip name in there, so in the event something changes, we can always revert it back. It can also help with the relink, so this is the second option. By using that, if there's any duplicate file names or duplicate time codes, we can use this as an additional step to ensure we relink to the correct file. Now, lots of post houses have done this. They do many different methods. Some will request the full file name. Some will request a truncated formulation of that. So always check with your editor if you need this and how to use it properly. Because, you know, this little setup is great for someone who's maybe starting to interact with a lot of other people. Maybe you've been shooting by yourself and now you're starting to work with editors and colorists. And this is quite an important step in that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do embedding in source clip file. And what you will see is as I've imported clips under real name, we are getting A001, clip 3, and then these last few digits are the date, so 4th of December, and a 2-letter random hash. So you can see that that's being pulled off this clip name and then being applied here. So if something gets renamed down the line, we can just use this to rename that clip. So I think now we are ready. So we've set up our camera raw, we've set up how it's being interpreted, we've set up our import options and the conform options for what the clip is going to have metadata-wise, and we've set up our color management. If you've got a show LUT, apply that in here under 3D output lookup table. The next bit that we're going to look at is we're going to look at burn-ins. So burn-ins are a fantastic resource to use when you're starting to work with a lot of people. Some use cases in which I have set up burn-ins, I'll just go through some clips now just so you can get a visual on what we're looking at, is over here. If I enable them, I'll just go to data burn-in, and we're going to have source timecode. We're going to have day, we're going to have source clip name, and also custom text. So these are really valuable. So say you're an editor and you're looking through a lot of clips and you're looking for scene 11 take 4. Either you've got to look for the boards or you're going to have to scrub through and look at continuity notes. This is a great way that you can have that information burnt in. You can tab through all the clips and very quickly find the information that you need, especially if you weren't on set or you weren't handling that data initially. So every job I've done, I've always had to do burn-ins, scene and take, and on some jobs, I even had to do lens information. So that was pretty tedious. We had to do lens type, the focal length, and which set it was from, because we had lots of units that had the same lens sets, and the VFX team needed to decide, oh, which distortion map we're using. Is it from the A set, the B set, the C set? So there's a lot of information that can be very valuable to a lot of different people. So definitely consider what burn-ins might help out your editor in the process. So we've set that up. And what I've done is at this stage, when you're importing your clips, you can start to put that information in. Yes, this stream will be available after it's finished on the YouTube channel. Yep, it'll be there. Shoot day 001. So I'm not going to do scene and take information just because that'll take a bit of time. So I've just put in shoot day 001 so the editor can figure out which days which clips are on. So super easy. So we're going to actually go into our timeline now. Now there's no color information that we need to do. If you want to apply CDLs, maybe from a DIT, or you've got a LUT, or you want to make some changes here for the editor to give them a really nice look, feel free to do that here. But I've typically never really dived too much into that. I've only ever really handled with CDL values and primary color correction. So once you've done that, once you've got our burn-ins, we can see that we're coming in as Rec 709 on our lovely footage here. We're then going to come to the delivery tab. And I saw there's quite a few questions about, hey, what should I be exporting to? What we're going to be showing today is going out to MXF. Now, obviously, if you're on macOS inside Resolve, you can go off to ProRes super easily. But Resolve doesn't have ProRes built into it natively. Red CineX does. So if in Red CineX you absolutely need to work with ProRes, you can export through that. And I also believe Assimilate Scratch, you can do ProRes as well. One other really cool thing about Red CineX is that you can actually burn in lens information. So the focal length and also the focus distance information can be implemented as well as the iris in real time, because the camera records if the lens supports it frame by frame metadata. So anyway, I digress. Let's dive straight in. So we're going to be doing rendering to individual clips because we want each clip to have its own file. It's each individual MXF file. We're then going to come down. I'm going to do MXF OP Atom. So obviously, if you're working on Windows, discuss with your editor what the best file for him is going to be. Avid files import fine into Premiere. They go into Avid and they do work in FCP. What if I'm working with different time codes on the same project? So in terms of different FPS speeds, if you're working with mixed FPS speeds, I would probably do separate projects for those. So on previous jobs I've done when we've had 30 FPS footage and 23976 footage, we'd have separate projects for that, and we would discuss with the editorial team about how to implement that footage with the sound that's coming in as well. So the difference between MXF OP Atom and MXF OP 1A is that Atom will go straight into Avid. There's no additional conform that needs to happen, and it will have your audio settings separate from the video file. So there'll be two separate bits, whereas MXF OP 1A will do it all in one file. I've always done OP Atom. Obviously discuss with your edit team about what they want to work with. Do tests as well. Very important to test a workflow before you deploy it. Make sure every step in the chain is working very easily. So we're going to come in. We're going to go to DNX HRLB for this particular setup. We're going to ensure that we're going to 3840 by 2160. We're then going to come in and go to audio. Obviously, at this point, you want to make sure that you're syncing your audio at this stage. Obviously, if your editor wants to do that for you, fantastic. He's given you a lot of less things to think about, but I've always typically sunk sound for editors. So I'll do that in Resolve. We then come across to file and we just do source name because we want each file to be named after the source clip. We then want to navigate and create a folder for each of our files. So in Proxy, you want to have your bins for each reel. This will keep things from a data management point of view very segregated and very easy to work with. So make those folders now for all the clips that you have. And then we basically render. So those clips should have that real ID burnt in and any additional metadata that you decide to put into it. So at this point, we're actually ready to edit. We're ready to send these off to our editor with the burn-ins, with the look, and with the metadata. So let's exit out of DaVinci Resolve, and we're just going to go into Premiere Pro now. I know a lot of people will be working in Final Cut Pro and other editing applications. As we've only got access to Windows machines, during this lockdown, we do want to do one looking at Final Cut Pro at a later date to show setting that up and working with R3Ds. But for the moment, a lot of these steps are going to be the exact same. You're going to be rendering the exact same in DaVinci Resolve, and those clips are going to be going off to your editor in the exact same way. Can you put the extended data into the proxies? No, not as far as I'm aware. So in terms of when you're working with extended data, you need to actually extract that data from the R3D. So I was recently on a project where we were testing this. We were testing it both internally on the camera and through an output box. So you can generate a file. So on Zeiss's website, there is a series of articles showing you how to extract that data. So you can extract that data into a little file that you can then send off to your VFX team. They can then import that distortion map. So it won't travel along with the proxy, sadly. So you have to export that as a little, I can't remember what the file extension is, but there's it's all written out on the Zeiss website really well, and it does work very well. I've tested it as well. So we've come into Premiere Pro. Just so you know what my sequence settings are, I have set them up exactly the same as the footage that's coming in. So I've done DNX HR UHD. We've got a 3840 by 2160 timeline. I've matched the sample rate, and we've also got 23976, which is what these clips were. We're now going to come into Media Browser. We're going to find out where our proxy files are. You basically just highlight all of those, and then you import them, and all of those files will now start coming in, and you can start editing as you would and making your Oscar award-winning edit. So to save on time, I've done a very quick little edit here. As we can see, our burn-ins are coming in, and this is going to make my life very easy in terms of, hey, what scene and take is this? Oh, it's this one. This is where this shot could be. I'm looking at the continuity notes, and I can see this is my selected take, scene 3, take 1. There we go. So we've got a little edit going on here. Now, in terms of this workflow, there are certain things you need to consider when we're then sending this back to DaVinci Resolve. If you're doing things like stabilization, time remapping, using Adobe plugins to make crazy effects and transitions, those won't go through an XML or EDL or ALE, which is what we're going to kind of be looking at today. So if you're starting to work with a VFX team or someone who's doing graphics, work out with them how you're going to deliver either DPX sequences or EXRs to them, in which case you'll be moving out of RAW and into uncompressed, and they'll then deliver that back to you. So just a couple of things to consider in terms of, because we're working between multiple applications, certain things won't work through these XMLs. Some will. Every now and again, I've seen people do size information. I've seen certain types of time remapping work as well. I think if it's keyframed, it starts to be a bit buggy. But if you're just doing it through the simple panel, doing some time remapping, I think it might work, but do some tests on your end because I haven't gone into detail with that. Just seen something about HD. So in terms of retaining red raw metadata on a proxy file, it's very much dependent on what information you're putting into it. Obviously, the containers can't handle every single bit and byte of information, but what you can do is either through an ALE is get some custom fields that if you want to send information down the pipeline, you can have those follow through. So say you wanted CDL values or you wanted lens information, you can create an ALE and then send that information downstream to link it back up to clips should you need to. But maybe we can dive into that a little bit at a later date. So let's say we're happy with our edit. This is going to be the creative process where the fun begins and we've put our scene together. And now we want to figure out how are we going to bring this back into Resolve to start the grade. So what we're going to do is we're going to come and we're going to export an XML. And there's a couple of reasons why I've selected XML for this. I really like XML because it is firstly human and also machine readable. Some other solutions are either just binary or you've really got to understand a lot about what's going on inside that wrapper to figure out what's going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down to export and then just Final Cut Pro XML. We're going to tick that and we're then going to export it. We send this off to our colorist along with our raw files, and now we're going to jump into the relink and the conform. So I'm just going to cancel that. We're going to minimize Premiere Pro. We're going to come back to DaVinci Resolve. So the colorist would probably have already started a new project, so you wouldn't have the proxies already in here. You'd be starting from a blank canvas. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make some adjustments to our project. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come into Camera Raw, and we're going to change out of Rec 709 into that lovely red, white, gamma RGB and into that log 3G10 to give us the best possible digital negative to start working with. For me, because my machine can handle full res real-time playback, I'm going to select that. But if your machine can't quite handle that, it's perfectly fine to grade in a slightly lower decode quality. All you've got to do is just drop it down, and then when you come to render, re-enable the full one. Can you show Resolve proxies? So the reason why I'm not making proxies, sorry, just seeing one of my moderators sending me a question there. The reason why I'm showing in Resolve is because we've got the ability to control burn-ins really well, control presets. We've got a lot of different input and output options while also being able to bring in CDLs and those kind of things. But for me, it's just a matter of comfort. So I've always created proxies in DaVinci Resolve because sometimes you may be mixing cameras. And obviously, Red Cine X is great for red footage, but every now and again, you might have a little GoPro for a little crash cam shot, and having a simple interface and workflow that can have all your media go through it is really valuable because then you're not chopping and changing with different presets and settings. So that's probably why I would consider working in Resolve. Obviously, if there's a specific reason that you want to work in Red Cine X, such as for ProRes, that's perfectly fine. You just obviously got to discuss with your editor and figure out the perfect workflow to mix and match it all together. So we've come in, we've set our red, white, gamma RGB, our playback settings. We're now going to come into color management. So this is the point where if you've got a show LUT, you can apply this as well. Or if you want to use a lookup table to start, have a good starting point for your look. And for this we are. So we're not going to start from a straight log. We're going to come to 3D output lookup table. And there is a few places to do this. So I was always trained through my various lab supervisors to do it at this stage. You can do it on the timeline level though as nodes. So there's a couple of different ways of working. Again, there's no real wrong way of working. It's just how you want to work and what makes it easy for you. So I'm going to apply a creative lookup table, and I'm going to come down to red ST4 Rec 709 BT1886 because we're working in a Rec 709 world at the moment for this project. So we're going to come in. We're now going to save and apply that. So any footage that comes in, it's going to get converted out of that raw ones and zeros into red, white, gamma RGB and log 3G10. So we then come across to our edit panel, and we're now going to import that XML. And actually one thing that I will show you, because I want to show this here, is there's lots of different types of XML. So I'm just going to open up the XML here. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the doc type. So there's two kind of very popular types of XML. Not all are created equal. So there's XMEML, which is what Premiere Pro uses, and there is also FCP XML. And both will get you to the same point in terms of importing your footage correctly and getting the right clips in, but some will have different parameters. So FCP XML is slightly more truncated, it's slightly more modern, so it's slightly more efficient in how its data is laid out. But then XMEML has a lot of Premiere Pro specific metadata fields built into it. So again, there's no wrong or right one. It's just the fact that they kind of speak a different language. So if you've been editing in Premiere and maybe you've got an additional editor who's working in FCP, you're going to have to make sure that you convert your XML into a language that Final Cut Pro can read. Thankfully, Resolve will read both, but just those specific NLEs, there isn't typically cross-compatibility with this specific version of XML. We can also see with the data that we created, so we can see that we've got our A001, clip 3, our MXF, and we're getting our file name coming through, which, because of our real ID, how we named it, that can then also assist us in relinking this clip. So we're now going to work on importing this XML into Resolve. So timelines, import, and then AAF, EDL, XML. So all of them import the same way. We're obviously going to do XML. I'm going to import it, and there's a few things we need to select here. So firstly, automatically import source clips into the media pool. Yes, so any R3Ds we find, please import them. The next bit is ignore file extensions when matching. So ignore that, because obviously at the moment it's looking for that MXF file and we want to look for that R3D file. Make sure your MXF and R3D files are in separate places, not just all in one big massive folder. We're going to check our timeline resolution, and we're now going to set OK. And it's going to say, hey, where are your R3D files? So for you, that'll be on an external drive, but for me, I've got it on my desktop just to keep things quick and rapid. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to go to my desktop, I'm going to go to Proxy Stream, Footage, RAW. When I press OK, it's going to find all of those, look at the inputs and outpoints, and bring all of that cuts in for us. I'm going to press OK. And bada bing, bada boom, we can see that our clips have come in. We can see on the left-hand panel, they are coming in as log. Our timeline has been created. We can see all of those cuts have come through. We can also see that our lookup table is being applied. So we're going to come in. We're going to turn it off just so you can see that it is coming in as log. And there are a few ways we can check that everything has worked correctly. So firstly, we can see .r3d here. We can come into the media pool, and we can see over here, format red. So we know that our relink has come in correctly. We can see the real names are working, and there's been no errors. So we've had a successful relink. I've just seen a question for one of my moderators. When working in Resolve, do you recommend Resolve's noise reduction, or should we use the red raw noise reduction? So I would typically, when I'm looking at footage, if I see a lot of red channel noise, I will just dive in straight away and I will use the chroma noise reduction, because when Dan Duran showed this to me, it was absolutely amazing in just getting rid of that red channel noise. That's all that it's looking for. So in terms of Resolve's noise reduction, I have found that it is really rather good. So it's potentially a balance of seeing how they work together and what type of noise you're kind of getting through. If there's flashing pixels, obviously in the first session we had, we showed how we can get rid of those flash and hot pixels. So it's kind of a bit of a balance of seeing what works well for that specific shot, because each shot kind of needs a different amount of noise reduction sometimes, if it's required at all. And now we can kind of start working with this raw clip. So I'm going to turn off my data burn-ins, because I obviously no longer need these. I'm just going to turn all of these off. And we still have our raw control. So this is where it starts getting exciting. We can still come in and change metadata and change everything about the clip. So I'm just going to come in and I'm going to put my LUT back on. Rec 709, ST4, right down here at the bottom. And then, oh, hey, actually, I want to boost the ISO. So let's go to this shot. Oh, hey, actually, I want to boost it. Clip. I'm going to come in and we're then going to go, actually, let's go 1600 ISO. Boom. There we go. ISO adjustment made. Let's start getting creative. Let's make this an amazing Oscar award-winning short film here. So that's kind of how this proxy workflow can kind of be integrated. Obviously, I think it's important for you to establish your own one with how you want to work with an editor. I know I've said it a few times, but I know that some people may be like, oh, this doesn't work well for me. But you can use this to establish how you want to work. And I think now will be a fantastic time to jump into our Q&A with Clay and Dan Duran. So hopefully some of you have taken some bits away from this. I hope it was useful. We saw a lot of people wondering how they can use proxy workflows with R3Ds. Was it even possible? Yes. Hopefully you've seen how easy it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to exit out of this, and I'm just going to hopefully join a call with Dan and Clay on it. So give me 2 seconds just to join that call with them. Just going to close everything else so nothing is in the way there. Just going to open up here. Let's join the call. I made a nice little layout, so hopefully it looks nice and professional. Hopefully it works first time doing it live. So joining in. Before we go fully live, I'm just going to join computer audio, start video, get them full screen. And I'm just going to check in OBS that we're going to be having the sound coming through. And I believe that we should be coming through. Hey, Clay. Hey, Dan. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, John?
Did you guys enjoy the stream? Was it good?
Yeah, it was great.
You are killing it, bro. Killing it.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. So I just thought we'd start off. Maybe both of you guys just give a little brief introduction to yourselves for those of you that don't know who you are, just to get things kicked off.
Dan's been here longer. I think you should go first.
Yeah, no, I do a lot of our workflow and post support over at Red. I've been here for almost, I think, 13 years. So since 4K came out with the Red one, so I've gone through a lot of workflows over the years. So any questions you guys have, we can definitely go over.
Yeah, I'm the lucky kid in the candy store. I get to make content for Red and play with cameras and do tests, and I'm very, very happy for it. So I do a lot of our internal stuff. So that video, the Red Tech video you saw beforehand, that's a video that I made, edited, and all of that stuff.
Awesome. So I think one place that I think would be cool to start off with is talking about R3D trims. So me and you, Clay, actually worked quite closely with R3D trims on this. I know you had quite a cool little analogy to kind of describe how valuable those can be.
Yeah, so I mean, a big thing for us was that we were sending clips back and forth for the little edit that Johnny was putting together. And we would love to work off the RAW every time we have the availability to. So sending RAW clips is important to us. So we were doing R3D trims, and we sent the edit over in these short little R3D trims. And what we realized is that was causing some problems, and he didn't have enough handles on either side. And so we decided, you know what, it's actually better if we take those and we give you some of the full clips, so that then you're referencing different points in that clip instead of having specific file names for an individual R3D trim. And so when we did that, we found something really interesting, which is that when I sent you the original project, R3D trimmed, it was like, I think it was 8 to 10 gigabytes per transfer. So I did 2 transfers. That was about 20 gigs. Then when I sent you whole clips, they were about 20 gigs per shot.
Yeah.
So
yes,
we actually tripled the size that we were sending back and forth to each other. So what we ended up doing as a better workflow is, like we said, doing R3D trims. And so we found out the hard way that we didn't want to go back to those original files because they were so heavy to send over the internet.
No, it really did make life a lot. Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the cool thing about R3D trims as well is it's not like you transcoding it to a new file format. You're just copying just the certain pieces you want of R3D. So it goes very, very fast.
I'm just seeing a question that's come in for Dan. Can you change the resolution with the R3D trims, or is it just the duration?
It'd just be a duration. It's just copying the original source R3D into whatever section you want, whatever time code or frames, or you can even do single frames. I do that quite often to send over to VFX or whoever. You can send a single frame, and it makes it very small, so it's even small enough to drop in an email.
So Clay, I thought it would be quite cool. I know we discussed about this earlier. Potentially talking about how you started to integrate your Red Tech videos, because typically you work by yourself. So how you've kind of evolved that workflow to start working with more people as more of a collaboration. Because obviously during this downtime, I'm sure a lot of people are starting to collaborate on projects they never usually would have.
Exactly. So I was just working with some people to get some footage for an edit that we've got coming out. And we started off and we had some footage that I had already. And we did a little edit, but it felt a little bit incomplete. And so we were looking for some more clips to round out that edit. And so first I said, hey, do you have clips you can send to me? And they said, yeah, we have a bunch of clips, but that's going to take a really long time to do. And so what I suggested was, hey, go ahead and make some proxies, just do a batch render of proxies, upload those so that I can see them. And then I'm going to go through, download those proxies, make a little edit, and then send you the EDL or XML so that you can then take those R3Ds and only send me the R3Ds that I want to use. That's been a big part for me, is that getting access to the wider variety of stuff to pick from and then diving into what I want better resolution for and raw data, what I really want the R3Ds for. That's been one of the best processes for me. Yeah, it's funny because like you said, I work by myself a lot, so this change has been kind of cool. It's been fun to jump into other people's workflows. I'm living in Dan's world a little bit more, which I'm sure he can tell you about.
I just saw a question come in there, Dan. Where can you create these R3D trims? Is it only in Red Cine X?
Red Cine X is probably one of the easiest ways because you can send EDLs or XMLs into Red Cine X and do a batch export of whatever you want R3Ds. And you can even add handles like you guys did. So that is an option. But Resolve, you can do media manage on a project, and that will do it as well. So there's a few ways of doing it.
Nice one. Just scrolling through to see what kind of other questions are coming soon. Obviously, lots about Final Cut Pro. We do have one in the works for that. Is there anything, Dan, that typically comes up for you when you're working with people who have just started with working with red footage? Is there anything that stands out that people end up misunderstanding or doing wrong potentially?
There's no really right or wrong to workflow. It's whatever works best for your system or your project or whatever you're doing. I think it just comes down to just understanding the file format and how it works, like the advantages of R3Ds, what you can do with metadata, certain things like you just said. The chroma noise reduction was a great option. Hey, there's underexposed footage. You have that option now. You can use chroma noise reduction in Resolve 16.2 under the raw parameters. So it's just really staying up to date on a file format and really what works best for whatever you're doing. So there's no right or wrong. It's just finding out
whatever works best for you.
Yeah, really.
I love that point. I love that point because something like noise reduction is a great example of you wouldn't aim to shoot and need noise reduction. It's not something you'd plan ahead for. But the reality is that sometimes we're in the field and we don't have as much control over those type of scenarios as we would like to. And knowing your file formats and how you can work with those in post lets you get more out of those situations. And a lot of people will say that's a dirty secret. That's like, no, we don't want to use noise reduction. It's like, we want to use whatever tools are available to us to make the best project. And that's the part that I think is the most important when we talk about workflow. It's what's going to make your project sing, what's going to make your piece better than it would have been, before.
Yeah.
One question that I just seen come in about working with ACEs, is there an IDT for working with it within Resolve?
Yeah, they actually just updated it in the latest 16.2. There is IDT from red, white, gamut, log3g10 into ACEs. What's cool is it's, if you have the R3D, we actually have the ACEs, input or ACEs transform built in directly to the SDK. So you can go directly from R3 without having to do IDT into ACEs if you go through that workflow. So very cool, very unique, and it makes us stay consistent between software applications.
Just scrolling through, seeing a few more for Dan there. Do you think that we will be needing proxy workflows going forward into the future?
I think eventually proxy workflows are going to eventually go away, right? Because hardware is getting faster and faster. On a laptop, I know you did in your last series or last video that you were playing 8K real-time full res off a laptop. That is pretty amazing. So, our file formats and hardware are going to get faster and faster. I don't know how long proxies will live, but there's going to be time and place, right? With uploading and, definitely going through, you know, the web, there's always going to be a time and place for certain formats, but I think the majority are going to probably lean away towards proxies in the future.
So what's this coming through?
Hey, hopefully I'm not frozen anymore, everybody. I apologize.
No, that's come back through. Yeah, you froze there for a little bit.
It's Petrus.
Any questions, feel free to paint them through in the chat, guys. Our moderators are
I'm
looking
just
as
a
well.
really good actor.
I see one from John Frey here. Personally, which one do you guys prefer doing? Proxies in camera, or do you prefer doing them post in DaVinci Resolve or Red Cine X?
I think this goes back to what works best for you, right? If you have a high-end system with decent hardware, you know, you have a lot more flexibility when you're creating them yourselves. In camera is great because it's going to save a lot of time. So it all depends, really. There's no right or wrong. It's just what's more important for you for this specific project.
Totally. And turnaround time to me is another big important thing to think about when you're talking about that stuff. So like, and how long you're going to be rolling. So if I'm doing an interview, that's maybe a 2-hour interview, shooting proxies actually on the card is going to reduce how much time I can shoot, which means that I'm going to have to cut off my interview subject at some point to say, hey, excuse me, I got to switch mags. So there's different applications where you might want one or the other, but there's a really good point for like, if you're doing live event coverage, if you're doing something that needs to be turned around by the host, makes editing really fast and the finalizing process a lot easier. So it really is a lot of this stuff with filmmaking, in my opinion, is like, there's just no easy button. There's specific scenarios that require specific workarounds or workflows that enhance those settings.
One question that I just saw come through, what kind of cloud solutions are there for working with productions and proxies? I know that Frame.io, obviously a very popular one. Have you guys had any experience in working with that?
Frame.io is my favorite. That's what we currently use internally to spread things around. It's really great. I've worked on remote edits with people doing that. You can, you know, there's a lot more that they're doing with integrating with the actual apps themselves and things. Dan, I know you know some of that stuff. I'll let you speak to.
Yeah, they did a really cool presentation at the HPA recently where you were recording files directly off the camera. So there was going through the HDSDI, they were sending it directly to a Frame.io computer. So as soon as you hit stop record, you could start editing right away, and then it's sent up to the cloud. So very cool stuff that they're doing, and you know, they're definitely future-proofing workflows, which is awesome.
Just had another question coming through from one of the moderators. Any recommendations for Premiere timeline settings when you've got HD proxies, but you know you're finishing in 4K down the stream?
I love this. This is another like bad answer. I would make a 4K timeline and actually up-res my proxies to work in that 4K timeline, because either way, you're gonna have to resize your clips afterwards, and at least you're building your sequence in a way that you're gonna be able to duplicate that sequence and keep working in it as you relink those files. When you make an HD timeline, then you relink to 4K, you're gonna resize your files because it's a different size timeline. And if you wanna finish in 4K, you're actually gonna need to change your sequence settings to update with that. So it's kind of a weird backwards answer, but I do think that making a 4K timeline is a better solution. Uh-oh, everybody's frozen. That's probably not good.
It's struggling along there. It's one of those things where you tested it yesterday, worked flawlessly, come on today, and everyone's internet is falling apart.
I do apologize. I'm gonna try to reset my camera in case. Am I frozen for you guys?
Yeah, for me you are.
Okay, I'm gonna try to reset my camera.
One other question that I see coming through: what would the minimum specs for a laptop be that you would, somebody who wants to work with R3Ds, what kind of specs would they need to look out for?
That's an interesting question because it all depends, right? What can you afford? I would think you put money into certain pieces of hardware first. With our Nvidia acceleration, you know, GPU should be a priority. If it's a laptop, you know, the CPU probably be, you know, the next topic because there's a lot of processing that goes through rendering and other, you know, aspects through the CPU. So prioritize GPU first, then CPU. RAM is not really needed so much with us. What's cool, hard drive space and speed, like you can play back a 8K full res real time off something only needs to do about, less than 300 megabytes a second, on average 150 megabytes a second. So yes, obviously having an SSD M2 would be, faster the better, just in all aspects. But I would just prioritize GPU. I've been loving what the 2080s have been doing recently. They are pretty amazing.
See what any other questions are coming through. Would you use an H.264 as a proxy or ProRes 422? Why and or why not?
Yeah, I would probably lean towards the ProRes. It's a very efficient codec and it's easier to work with, in my opinion. So ProRes or DNX are probably the top two.
But once again, it kind of depends sometimes on what your application is, right? So if I'm sending a bunch of files for people to review and I don't really care that the quality is very good, I'd say I'm sending the same take or the same action from a scene for 15 takes. And I just want to know, hey, do you like take 4 or take 5? But I want them to review all takes. I might just upload the quickest, lowest quality file if we're only reviewing the narrative content, but it's going to make it much harder to review the quality of the shots.
Let's see what else is coming through. If I export a DCP from Resolve, could this also be used as my master file? Now, I know for VFX, you would typically go out to a EXR kind of sequence that will become your new digital negative for the VFX team. But what about using a DCP for that?
DCP is usually the final delivery format. So I don't know too many people use that as a, what was the question, Master?
Maybe there's a confusion because in a DCP is usually a DPX sequence, which is something that a lot of people will encode. But it's just not, the DCP itself is like a cinema protocol.
I think that.
It's a cinema package. I don't see anyone really doing that. It's used for delivery for cinema, right? So you still want to create, there's different versions, DPXs, EXRs, IMFs. There's a lot of ways creating a master format, but I don't see DCPs used really too often or ever.
So I just had a follow-up question for one of the things I was talking about earlier. Someone was talking about separate MXFs for different frame rates. So what I was referring to there was that in some situations, I've had projects where they will be shooting 24, but then we might be getting some 30 FPS stuff coming in. So I would create a new Resolve project for that frame rate. He then had a follow-up question saying, I mostly shoot slow-mo, but my final output is always 24. Do I need to make proxies and different projects for each frame rate? And the answer for me for that is no. If you shot at 24 FPS as your base frame rate and then went to 60 or some off frame rate, it's fine to then bring that in. I don't know if there's any other comments from you guys there. Seems to be just about, is there anything particular they need to do to set up when they're shooting slow-mo?
No, I mean, the one thing you can do to speed your process up a little bit is to shoot even replications, right? So 24, 48, that way you have a simpler math to do when you speed it if you want to retime it. But you really just have to retime it or reinterpret it.
I'll just see if there's any more questions coming in and then potentially consider wrapping this up. Feel free to put them into the chat. I'm reading the chat as well as our moderators and pinging questions over to me. Just see if any more do.
I will say that I've worked on some projects where I was shooting 48, but recording very speed audio in the background for documentary footage, so that then you could use essentially the more artsy slow-mo shot if you needed that, but could also revert to pairing it with live captured audio if you needed to. I don't know if maybe that's what they're talking about when they say the proxy is always 24. Because in that case, what happens is I have my very speed audio track and then I retime my 48 speed footage and then pair it with the very speed audio track.
do feel free to send us an email on solitaryseries@red.com. Any further questions, we can help follow up and try and get you the exact answer you're looking for there. We'll just finish off with one final question that I just saw there. Curious about proxy benefits outside of performance convenience. Is there anything else that somebody may want to consider a proxy for as opposed to just quicker render times?
Usually render times. What's cool is like if you need to, sync audio, it's even faster off a proxy. So you can do, there's different ways to take advantage of them, but usually it's just for speed benefits.
Okay, fantastic. So I think we will look to wrap things up here. I'm just going to leave the call with you guys now. Thank you very much for tuning in to have a little bit of a quick Q&A here. It's been awesome. I hope everyone else found it very interesting as well. So I'll just dive out of this Ring Central call. Thanks for stopping by, guys.
Bye, guys.
All right, bye. Thank you.
So I'll just switch back to my final view here. So thank you everyone for joining in. I hope that Q&A was interesting there. Sorry about some of the connection issues there with them freezing. Obviously with me streaming and then taking a call in at the same time, struggled a little bit there. So we'll definitely look to get that fine-tuned in the future. But any questions, email us at solitaryseries@red.com. We'll get back to you. Any suggestions? On Friday, we've got a Behind the Look series, which is super exciting. And we will keep these coming thick and fast to you because these streams are awesome. So everyone stay safe, have a great day, and thank you for stopping by.
We are also very fortunate at this day and age. There's so much great camera choices out there in the marketplace. So why did I choose Red? Look, at the end of the day, I need a workhorse. Something that won't let me down, and it has to tick as many of my boxes as possible. What I use day to day has to fall into three major categories. Image quality being number one, and it has to be easy to use, on set and all the way through the post-production process. Third is size and weight. I've never been emotionally connected to brand names or logos. I've just jumped between cameras my whole working career. Always in search of something that can deliver a better image in the least time possible. So my reason for using Red cameras is purely logical. Speed and performance are the two things that will give me a creative edge. It's as simple as that. For me, image quality is everything. Some say resolution is not important, but for me it is. I shot a lot of 10 by 8 inch film in my photography days, which was probably and still is the ultimate in resolution. Having all that resolution gave me so many options to reframe and resize with no worries about grain, and yes, the lens had to perform as well, or the resolution was wasted. 8K resolution allows me to push in 100, 200% and reframe. It's like having 2 or 3 lenses on the same camera during the same take. The more resolution and deep data there is in the RAW container, the more dynamic range I have, meaning the more colour grading choices I have, meaning the less noise there is. It's simple schoolboy math. You can't argue the science, even though people love to try. I realised many years ago back in my film days that lenses dictate the overall look, density, sharpness, contrast, mixed in with distortion and flares and colour aberrations. You can push and pull all you want in the colouring suite, but you're never going to change a lens's optical look or character. So for me, that's where the look comes from. So if you're after a cinematic look, you have to use a lens that gives you that look. The red sensor will capture all the information and more so, but only you ultimately decide on that final look. This is why I collect so many lenses, and I'm always on the lookout for more. They're all artist brushes at the end of the day. There is no such thing as a bad lens. The camera itself is as easy to use as an iPhone. Actually, it's easier. Actually, you can operate the whole bloody camera on an iPhone. But really, it's as easy as this. Turn the camera on. Frame rate adjust. Color temperature adjust. Focus. Press record. It's seriously that simple. There's something in there for everyone's needs. Anyone that says Red cameras are difficult to use obviously haven't used one. It's not rocket science. Overall, Red has made my shooting life so much easier. I'm actually getting quite lazy with exposure and colour settings these days, only because I don't live in a colour-baked world anymore. In my 35mm days, I had to be like spot on with everything, but now I'm in a RAW world, meaning I can change all that information later. If I'm in a rush trying to capture a performance or a shot that I could lose any second, or I've completely disregarded the colour temperature and I'm underexposed a couple of stops, all sorts of things can go down. But I don't really worry at all. There is so much latitude in the RAW file that I can easily retrieve my desired look. Framing and capturing the perfect shot is more important to me. I do a lot of visual effects work. 3D tracking can be an absolute bastard on noisy shots, and doing chroma key work can be an absolute pain in the ass also, but the 8K resolution makes it so much easier. And honestly, if I couldn't do any of this on a laptop, the deal would be over. But I can. I change my rigs in nearly every shoot. One day I'm shooting a feature film, the next one I'm shooting a TV ad, then I may send the camera underwater, then I'm putting it on a tracking arm or in a helicopter or hanging off a drone, and then the next day I'm on some round-the-world junket shooting handheld out of a backpack. I have no idea what my next job is, but I know I can configure my Red camera to adapt to most things I throw at it. Being able to edit, resize, reframe and grade 8K RAW all in real time is an absolute godsend for me, as it gives me so much extra spare time to be more creative. At the end of the day, the camera I choose needs to be a Swiss Army knife. But irrespective of how good my tools may be, content will always be king. But you need great tools to capture great content, and that's why I've chosen Red. Have a great day, everyone.